There are two kinds of medicine in this world. One was invented in a laboratory, patented by a corporation, and placed inside a white bottle with a child-proof cap. The other was discovered thousands of years ago, grows in the ground, costs less than a cup of coffee, and has been quietly passed down through generations of people who never once needed a prescription to live well. Right now, I'm holding both of them. Before we go any further, I want you to think about something. If you look at the health records of indigenous communities in Alaska, the Yupik, the Athabascan peoples, or Native American tribes on reservations before the 1950s, before fast food, before processed sugar flooded their lands, type 2 diabetes was essentially non-existent, not rare, not uncommon, non-existent. Researchers have documented this. The shift happened fast, within a single generation of dietary change. Traditional foods were replaced by commodity goods, white flour, canned sugar, refined corn, and with that shift came an explosion of blood sugar disease that has never stopped growing. Today, the pharmaceutical industry generates over $50 billion a year selling synthetic solutions for a condition that, in many cases, the body already knows how to manage, if only we give it the right tools. What they don't want you to know, and what I'm going to show you today, is that one of those tools is sitting in your kitchen right now, or it costs less than $2 at any farmer's market or grocery store. We call it pod shell tea. Traditional healers have called it the insulin of the earth. And in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what it is, why it works, how to make it, and how to use it at the right time. Because timing, as you'll see, is everything. Stay with me. What you're about to hear may be the most useful thing you watch this week. Let's start with the plant itself. What we're looking at is nothing exotic. These are bean pod shells, the outer casings of common legumes. Most people in America throw these away. They toss the pod, keep the bean, and never think twice about it. But that outer shell, the one that gets tossed in the compost, that is where the medicine lives. Ancient healers from Mesoamerica to the American Southwest understood something that modern nutritionists are only now catching up to. They observed that after large communal feasts, after meals heavy in corn, squash, and root vegetables, chewing on legume pods or drinking a broth made from them seemed to keep people sharp, energized, and free from the sluggishness that comes with a blood sugar spike. They didn't have glucose monitors, they didn't have insulin assays or clinical trials, but they had something else. Centuries of careful human observation. They called it clearing the sweetness from the blood. Now, what does modern science actually say about this? Here's where it gets fascinating. Legume pod shells, particularly from beans like Phaseolus vulgaris, which is your common green bean, kidney bean, and black bean, contain a group of compounds called phytochemicals, plant-derived molecules that interact with human biology in ways that, frankly, pharmaceutical chemists wish they'd thought of first. Among the most studied of these compounds are three in particular. The first is phaseolamin, a natural alpha-amylase inhibitor. Alpha-amylase is the enzyme in your digestive system responsible for breaking down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. When phaseolamin is present in your digestive tract before you eat a carbohydrate-heavy meal, it partially blocks that enzyme. The starch doesn't convert to glucose as quickly. The blood sugar spike is slower, lower, and shorter. The second is chromium, naturally occurring in bean pods in bioavailable form. Chromium enhances the sensitivity of insulin receptors on your cells. Think of it this way. Insulin is a key, and your cells have locks. In type 2 diabetes, those locks become stiff, resistant. They don't respond well to the key anymore. Chromium essentially oils those locks. It makes your cells listen to insulin again. The third is a group of fiber-bound flavonoids, particularly quercetin and camphorol, which have been shown in multiple peer-reviewed studies to reduce post-meal glucose levels and support pancreatic beta cell health, meaning they help protect the very cells that make insulin from burning out prematurely. Now, I want to mention one more plant that traditional healers often combined with bean pod tea, and that has now become the subject of serious scientific investigation. It's called Bauhinia forficata, known in folk medicine as pata de vaca, or the cow's hoof plant. Indigenous communities in South America have used it for blood sugar management for generations. Modern research has identified compounds in its leaves that appear to mimic insulin signaling at the cellular level, not by stimulating the pancreas to produce more insulin, but by directly signaling cells to absorb glucose from the bloodstream. That distinction is critical, because one of the biggest dangers in conventional diabetes management is overstimulating the pancreas, pushing it harder and harder until it eventually can't keep up. These plant compounds work differently. They work with your body's existing systems, not against them. They don't force, they guide. This is what traditional medicine understood intuitively. The goal was never to override the body. It was to remind the body of what it already knew how to do. Now we get to the part that most people miss, and it's the reason some people try this and feel absolutely nothing, while others see their energy and blood sugar completely stabilize within a single week. The secret is not just what you drink. The secret is when you drink it. Traditional healers didn't consume pod broth randomly throughout the day. They gave it before the feast, before the heavy meal. That timing was intentional, and now we understand exactly why it works the way it does. Here is your $2 protocol. Step 1. Gather your ingredients. You will need 10 to 15 dried bean pod shells from common beans, green beans, kidney beans, or black beans all work. The pods need to be dried, not fresh. If you buy fresh green beans at the grocery store, simply set the pods aside after shelling them and let them dry on a plate for 24 to 48 hours at room temperature. You can also find dried bean pods at Latin American markets, health food stores, or online, and they cost generously about $2 for enough supply to last you 2 to 3 weeks. You will also need 2 cups of clean water and optionally a small cinnamon stick, which we'll explain in a moment. Step 2. Prepare the tea break. The dried pod shells into smaller pieces, roughly 1 to 2 inch segments. This increases the surface area that comes into contact with the water and dramatically improves the extraction of the active compounds. Place them in a small pot with 2 cups of cold water. Bring the water to a boil, then reduce the heat to a gentle simmer. Let it simmer, not boil hard but simmer, for 15 to 20 minutes. You'll notice the water gradually takes on a light amber or greenish-brown color. That color is the phytochemicals releasing into the liquid. That is exactly what you want. If you're adding cinnamon, drop in a small stick during this simmering phase. Cinnamon, specifically Ceylon cinnamon, not the cassia variety commonly sold in supermarkets, contains a compound called cinnamaldehyde that has independently been shown to improve insulin sensitivity. It's not magic on its own, but combined with the bean pod compounds, it creates a small but meaningful synergy. After simmering, remove from heat and strain the liquid through a fine mesh strainer or a piece of cloth into a mug or jar. Let it cool to a comfortable drinking temperature. Do not add sugar. If you find the taste too earthy, a small squeeze of lemon juice changes the flavor profile significantly without interfering with the active compounds. Step 3. The timing window. This is everything. Drink your full cup of pod shell tea exactly 15 minutes before your largest carbohydrate meal of the day. For most Americans, that is lunch or dinner. If your heaviest carb load comes at lunch, rice, bread, pasta, potatoes, drink the tea at 11:45 for a noon meal. If it's dinner, drink it 15 minutes before you sit down to eat. Why 15 minutes specifically? Because that is the window the phaseolamin compound needs to reach your small intestine and establish what researchers informally call a starch barrier. When you then eat your meal, the carbohydrates encounter a digestive environment where the enzyme responsible for rapidly converting starch to sugar is partially inhibited. The glucose release becomes slower, more gradual, more like the release you'd get from a low-glycemic food rather than a blood sugar bomb. The chromium and flavonoids, meanwhile, have already begun priming your insulin receptors so that when glucose does enter your bloodstream, your cells are more ready to accept it. This is not a vague, theoretical benefit. This is a mechanistic, sequential process. The timing makes the mechanism work. What to expect in the first 7 days? In days 1 and 2, many people notice something subtle but distinct. The heavy, tired feeling that usually hits 30 to 60 minutes after a carb-heavy meal, that post-lunch crash, is noticeably reduced or absent. This is your first sign that the starch conversion is being slowed. By days 3 and 4, if you are monitoring your blood sugar, you may begin to see your post-meal readings trend lower than your baseline. Don't expect dramatic numbers in the first few days. The flavonoid compounds are cumulative in their action, meaning they build up supportive effects in your system over time. By days 5 through 7, people who are consistent about the 15-minute pre-meal timing typically report more stable energy throughout the afternoon, reduced cravings for sweets after meals, because their glucose isn't spiking and crashing as dramatically, and in some cases noticeably improved fasting blood sugar readings in the morning. Now, a word about consistency. Because this is where most people fall short. This is not a drug. It does not override your physiology with a chemical hammer. It works gently, nutritionally, cumulatively. That means skipping days matters more than it would with a synthetic medication. Think of it less like taking a pill and more like exercising. One session doesn't transform your cardiovascular system, but 5 sessions a week for a month absolutely does. The same principle applies here. Make the tea the night before if mornings are rushed. Prepare a 3-day batch and store it in the refrigerator. It keeps well for up to 72 hours. Reheat gently before drinking or consume at room temperature. The active compounds are stable enough to survive refrigeration without significant degradation. Optional enhancement, the 3-plant stack. For those who want to take this protocol further, traditional healers rarely relied on a single plant. They worked in combinations, what modern herbalists call stacking. If you want to amplify the effect of your podshell tea without adding cost or complexity, consider adding one of these 2 things. First, a 1/4 teaspoon of fenugreek seed powder stirred into the finished tea. Fenugreek contains soluble fiber and saponins that further slow gastric emptying, meaning food moves more slowly from your stomach into your small intestine, producing an even more gradual glucose curve. It has a slightly bitter maple-like taste that blends reasonably well with the earthy base of the pod tea. Second, 2 or 3 fresh or dried bitter melon slices added during the simmering phase. Bitter melon, known as Momordica carantia, is perhaps the most extensively studied plant for blood sugar management in the world. It contains at least 3 distinct insulin-mimicking compounds, and it has been used in traditional medicine across Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean for centuries. The taste is genuinely bitter, which is why the lemon juice trick becomes especially helpful if you go this route. Neither of these additions costs more than a few cents per serving. Together with the bean pod shells, you have a protocol that most traditional healers would recognize immediately, and that a growing body of nutritional science is now validating, study by study. Let's be honest about something. The pharmaceutical industry is not evil. The researchers who develop diabetes medications are not villains. Metformin in particular has genuinely helped millions of people manage a serious condition, and there are cases where medication is absolutely necessary and life-saving. But the industry is built on a business model, and that business model depends on you taking a pill every day for the rest of your life, not on you finding a $2 solution at a farmer's market. They don't fund studies on bean pods. There is no patent on a dried legume shell. There is no profit margin on something that grows in the ground. And so the research that does exist, and it does exist, published in journals like the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, Phytotherapy Research, and Diabetes Care, tends to stay quietly in the academic literature, rarely making its way onto the evening news or into your doctor's office conversation. Your doctor, meanwhile, has 7 minutes with you during an appointment. They were trained in a medical system that teaches pharmacological intervention. They are not trained in ethnobotany or traditional plant medicine. That is not a criticism. It's simply a description of how the system is built. It was built around drugs, because drugs are scalable, profitable, and patentable. Plants are none of those things, so the knowledge gets passed down differently. It travels through grandmothers in kitchens, through elders on reservations, through healers in rural communities who never stopped using what the earth provided. And now it travels here, to you, through a screen. I'm asking you to do one thing, not to throw away your medication. Please never stop prescribed medication without speaking to your doctor. Not to claim this tea is a cure. It is not a cure. Type 2 diabetes is a complex metabolic condition influenced by genetics, lifestyle, stress, sleep, and dozens of other factors. But I am asking you to try this for 7 days, consistently, 15 minutes before your largest carb meal, every day for 1 week. Pay attention to how you feel after lunch. Pay attention to your afternoon energy. If you have a glucose monitor, check your readings 1 hour after eating and compare them to your baseline from the week before. Let your own body be the evidence, because that is exactly what traditional healers ask their communities to do. Not to believe blindly, but to observe, to test, to trust the feedback of their own physical experience. You have been told for years that managing diabetes is complicated, expensive, and lifelong, and while managing it well does require real commitment and often medical support, the foundation, the base layer, does not have to come from a pharmacy. It can come from a pot of water and a handful of dried bean pods. $2, 15 minutes, 7 days. If this resonated with you, if something here made you think differently about what you already have access to, leave a comment below and tell me what you're going to try first. Share this with someone in your life who is managing blood sugar issues and hasn't heard this conversation yet. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because we are just getting started. The Earth has been growing medicine longer than any pharmaceutical company has existed. It's time to remember that.